in this session we will be discussing the statement assumption questions, how to solve them. Now if you are appearing for any competitive examination that involves reasoning and questions related to aptitude, statement assumptions, statement argument and statement conclusion are a must section to be solved and to focus on. Now as I mentioned, there are three types of problems. One is a statement assumption, the other is statement argument, and finally you have statement conclusion. So it's very important to have a good understanding between the differences of these three and how to solve these three. So we'll be discussing various techniques that will help us find out how to solve assumption problems. Now if you go on to various online lectures or various study material that's available, most of them will guide you directly with the problems. Our focus here would be to understand the concept, how to find out whether this question involves assumptions or not and what kind of assumptions are involved, and then once we are clear about the foundation, we will be solving and practicing few questions related to statement and assumptions. Now for the questions, if I generally say about the format, assumption problems involve questions or choices ending with is the choice implied or implicit. Argument says whether the choice is strong or weak. And finally conclusion says whether the conclusion follows or does not follow. So these are some of the common terminology that you will see in the statement assumption, statement argument and conclusion questions. Now we will be discussing 4 tricks to solve all kind of assumption problems. The first trick is you must act like a detective. Now here I have a discussion of a reporter to a minister at a nuclear missile launch function. The reporter asked the minister, "Are you in favor of nukes or nuclear missiles?" Minister says, "Anything for defense of the country." Now the reporter in the newspaper, you have a headline that says, "Minister strongly supports nuclear program." Now has this reporter done a detective work on what he was supposed to do? Did the minister meant what the reporter concluded here? Obviously not. The minister was saying, "I am in favor of anything that is meant for defense of the country." So the minister believes he is in favor of nuclear missiles only if it is in favor of defense of the nation. However, the reporter concluded it as minister supports the nuclear program. Minister is not in any case saying that he is supporting the nuclear program. He is saying, "I am supporting only the things that are meant for defense of the country." So it's important to understand the basic idea or the assumption behind what was said. Only then you can solve the problems related to statement and assumption very confidently. So the first important trick here is to be like a detective, to focus on each and every idea very carefully. The next is, there is an addition of some extra information. So the second trick that we will talk about is addition of extra information or new information, I can say. So if there is a statement that says, so this is the statement and this is the assumption, I can say, there are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there is a MasterCard. What does this mean? If I say happiness, if I say joy, so there are some things money cannot buy. So these are the things, for example, that money cannot buy, but for everything else, there is MasterCard. That means everything else can be purchased in monetary terms. So what is the hidden assumption here? The hidden assumption here is the world is divided into 2 kind of things. One that can be bought by money and another that cannot be bought by money. So can be bought by money is any goods or services, I can say, any emotional feeling like happiness, joy. Okay. So what is the hidden assumption in this statement? The hidden assumption in this statement is The author is trying to divide the world into two kind of things. So what is important here is, we must be able to understand the statement, and once we have understood the statement, we should be able to apply some new information that is obviously relevant to the statement. Then and then only we can understand or solve the problems related to assumption and statement and assumption. So that was the second key point. The first key point is we must act like a detective. The second is we should be able to introduce some new information and we should be able to understand why that new information has been included. The next is we must be able to validate the facts. Now, for example, the statement says Newton's gravitational theory is valid. Now in real world, I can say this theory is incorrect, but this theory is correct only if I assume that speed of the object is much less than the speed of the light. So in reality, this theory does not hold true, but in light of this assumption, I can say this theory holds true. So we must be able to understand a valid assumption behind any theory. So that's the third key point. Now this is applicable mostly in case of any of the theories. If you read about, all of the theories will have some hidden assumptions. So for example, if I talk about a theory related to industrial location, say, so it will assume the location of the raw material and the finished product. Okay, and there can be assumptions like a homogeneous surface or a isomorphic surface. What does that mean? That means that this theory can hold true or hold good only in light of certain given assumptions. If these assumptions are not true, this theory, if these assumptions are not being fulfilled, this theory cannot be true. So we must be able to validate the information in light of certain assumption. That's the third key point. So independently, if I say Newton's gravitational theory is valid, it would be an incorrect statement unless and until I mention that I am assuming that the speed of object is very less than the speed of light. Now, my final idea behind solving the statement assumption problem is finding the missing link. So if I talk about evolution of human being, and if I remove one element, I cannot move, or I cannot say Homo sapiens evolved directly from chimpanzee or orangutan. So there should be a kind of systematic manner in which I say evolution occurred. So it's important, the fourth important point here is to find the missing link. Now in this case, I have a statement and I have an assumption. The statement says India is increasing the defense spendings or expenditure on defense. The another statement says expenditure on social projects would decrease. That means I have say X amount with me. Out of that I am spending X by 2 for defense. Previously it was X by 3. It has increased to X by 2. Now the expenditure on social projects, previously it was 2x by 3 and it has been decreased to x by 2. What does that mean? That means for defense I am increasing my expenditure from 33% to 50%. On the other hand, for social projects I am decreasing my expenditure from 66.6 to 50%. The hidden assumption here is the total amount of fund I have is constant or fixed. Only if this funding is fixed, I can say I am increasing my defense expenditure on the cost of the social projects. Otherwise, it could have been true that both the spendings are increasing. But since the statement says the spending on one is increasing and another is decreasing, that means I have a hidden assumption that says the total amount of funding that I have is constant. So, the next important thing here that we try to understand is finding the missing link. So, this is the missing link. Only if we introduce this to the above given statements, it gives a feeling of completion. So, that is how we find out hidden assumptions. So, these are the 4 key points that would help you solve any kind of statement and assumption problems. Now we have discussed the basic tricks to solve the assumption and statement and assumption problems. We will be going around with some examples to help it better understand. However, before we start, it's very important to understand the difference between problems related to assumption and inference. Assumption usually involves bringing new information. Both of them are mutually exclusive. There is no connection between the two. And for inference, we are deducing something from the original given information. So I can say a basic characteristic of assumption would be to fill the gap, to reach to a conclusion, to support the conclusion, to strengthen the conclusion, to have a close tie between the statement and the conclusion. So assumption provides a platform for all these. Now mostly the format of question is, you have a statement, you have two assumptions given based on the statement, then you have the following choices: either assumption 1 is implicit, 2 is implicit, both are implicit, neither are implicit, or either are implicit. Now most of the students get confused between either and both. Both means that unless and until both the assumptions are true, we cannot say that this would be correct, but either means one of these has to be true in order for the answer to be fulfilled. So this is the general format, and as I previously mentioned, we must assume, we must consider, these are the kind of phrases that are given in the questions related to statement and assumption. Sometimes it's very direct, like you have statement and assumption 1, 2. If it is not so, there would be phrases like, if I assume, I have assumed such and such. So those would be the question that would go into the section of statement and assumption. And implicit or implied is a major word that you must understand here. Now we will be discussing some examples to help better understand the problems of statement and assumption. Now the first example says, never before such a lucid book was available on the topic. That means there were numerous books, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that were available on a certain topic, but never before such a lucid book like one was available for this topic. That means that topic had numerous books, but out of these numerous books, the only book that clearly explained the topic was one. Okay. Now the assumption is some other books were available on the topic. If I demonstrate it like this, definitely there were 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 books that were available on the topic. So my assumption 1 is implicit. Assumption 2 says you can write lucid books on very few topics. I cannot prove this because in the statement there is nowhere mentioned that lucid books can be written on only specific topics, or writing lucid book is very difficult. So therefore we can say lucid book should be written on very less topics. So this won't be a correct implication. So only assumption 1 is correct. So out of the choices I can say only assumption 1 is implied or implicit. So this is one example that we have discussed. Now the next example says, computer education should start at the school itself. Now that is the statement that computer education should start at the school itself. Why does the author say like this? The author might say like this because computer education must be easy, and if it is easy, it can be introduced in early classes. See, if I am trying to introduce differentiation and integration, can I introduce it at a lower class, say first or second? Obviously not. But the author here says computer education should start at the school itself, and that means it should start early and should not move till college. That means this must be an easy proposition for students to understand, or they should have good grasping, they can have good grasping at an early age on computers. So if I say learning computers is easy, that would be true. That would be definitely an implication of this statement. And next is computer education fetches job easily. Since it's talking just till the school level, there is no clue that says something about job or occupation or career, this cannot be a correct implication. So only assumption 1 would be a correct assumption here. So again I would say A would be the correct option here. Now next question, you have again a statement and you have two assumptions. Now it's very interesting to understand the question first. The statement says, consider to consult us before making a decision on investment. Say I have 10,000 rupees with me and I want to make an investment for this 10,000 rupees. So the statement says consult us before making a decision on investment. So this 10,000 I can go to the market and buy XYZ stuff. Next I can invest in say savings. I can spend this for education of children and I can spend this for n number of reasons. But the statement here says it is good to go to that consultant to get a wise decision where to invest this money, and if this money is coming every month, for example, what would be the best option you should do with this money. So assumption 1 says you may take a wrong decision if you do not consult us. That's true, because for example, if I am not going to a consultant and I feel that it has been long time I have gone out for marketing, I might go to market and spend all 10,000 rupees. So I might take a wrong decision if I do not consult. So that is one of the hidden implications. That's very clear. The next says it is important to take a right decision. That is again very important, because it here says that consult us before making any decision. That means it's important to take a right decision, and only if you take a right decision you can have a good investment proposition. So I can say both the assumptions are correct here, and since both the assumptions are correct, I can say D would be the correct choice here. So it's very important to understand the nature of question before we start answering such kind of questions. Finally, you have a last question that we would be practicing here. So this question says, government has permitted unaided colleges to increase their fees. What does this mean? So if I divide the colleges into two, there is one college that is aided by government and another college that is unaided by government. The college that is aided by government would receive funds from the college. However, the unaided college is not receiving any kind of funds from the college. So what would happen here would be, they would require money from some source to run the college. As a result, what they would do is, they would increase the fees. So the question says, government has permitted unaided colleges to increase their fees. Okay. Now the assumption is unaided colleges are in financial difficulties. That can be true, because they are needing money in some fashion or the another to run the college, and only because they want to run the college successfully, they are trying to increase the fees of the students. So that would be a correct implication. The next says, aided college do not need to increase the fees. Now there is nothing mentioned about this in the statement that aided colleges do not need to increase the fees. We can say that unaided colleges are in financial crisis and they need to increase the fees, but government has permitted unaided colleges. Government is still funding the aided colleges. So we cannot say aided colleges do not need to increase their fees. We cannot say anything about aided colleges here, whether they need to increase the fees or not. Whatever is mentioned is simply about the unaided colleges. Therefore, only assumption 1 would be implied in this case, and we cannot say assumption 2 is implied. So these were some of the practice questions that we did to help understand the problems related to statement and assumption. In the next class, we will be doing problems related to statement and conclusion, which are again a very important part in most of the competitive examinations that involve reasoning and mental ability. You can subscribe to our channel, and for any questions or doubt, leave them as comment below and we'll be happy to answer those. Have a good day ahead.